like for everyone to think for a moment about the value of human life. And does one person's life have any more value than another person's? The current fee-for-service healthcare system rations out care based on the patient's ability to pay. I believe this is unethical. It is criminal. 95% of the country is still functioning on this fee-for-service model. I believe everyone should be treated the same. Everyone should have access to primary care regardless of their ability to pay.
Hi, I'm Dr. Faisel Syed. Welcome to another episode of Faisel and Friends. We're here because we believe everyone deserves access to quality primary care, and ChenMed needs physicians to take care of them. Tonight's topic is forging a happier future. My co-host and moderator of the chat is Dr. Dan McCarter. Welcome, Dr. Dan.
Hey, Faisel. It's great to be with you.
It's good to be back with you again. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It's always good to find out about how to be happier.
Yes, and I'm excited about having our friend joining us tonight. Let's welcome Dr. Dyke Drummond. Dr. Dyke Drummond, welcome.
Hey, great to be here, Faisel. I feel like I should walk in a door and change my jacket and my shoes and sing a little song.
Well, okay, truth be told, shoes are optional.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine?
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of yours. I'm so glad that we got connected over the last few months. But I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction. If you can kind of let us know about the path that you've taken with the Happy MD and how that all kind of came about.
You want the whole story?
I'd love to know. I'd love to know a little bit about like how you got to where you are now.
Well, I am from a family of strong women. And if you look back in time in the 1930s, my maternal grandmother was at the University of Illinois, wanted to be a doctor, came home a teacher. An honorable trade for a woman at the time. She would have been one of the very first female physicians in the state of Illinois had she been able to go through with the plan. And then in the 50s, my mother, her daughter, went to college at the University of Illinois, wanted to be a doctor, came home a teacher. I was the oldest grandchild, the first male and grandchild. And so in the background, my mother and my grandmother really wanted me to become a doctor. And we're not from a family though where you say that out loud. So I didn't get told that at the dinner table when I was a boy or anything like that. But I got to my senior year in college. I had a honors biology degree at Indiana University. And I said, what do I do now? Because I certainly don't want to go into a master's program and be a lab rat. I said, oh my gosh, this is the perfect pre-med degree. I will go and apply to some medical schools. And if I get into a good one, what the heck, maybe I'll go. And I got into Mayo, and they made it sure that I knew that there were 900 applicants for the 5 out-of-state positions. Interesting backstory. I played rugby as a college student, and I grew up in England, at least as a high school student. So I had like 7 or 8 years of rugby under my belt when I interviewed at Mayo, and they gave me a guy who was an old rugby player. We talked for half an hour, my single faculty interview at Mayo, half an hour about rugby. Didn't mention my career aspirations or any of that kind of stuff. I got the letter in the mail and said, I'd be crazy not to go. So I graduated from Mayo. Mayo is a little tiny medical school on that great big Mayo resident campus. And 2 of the 4 years I was at Mayo, we sent cold records in January, which is not what you want to do in Minnesota. So I immediately went out to California, UC Davis system, Redding, California, way up in north in the Central Valley. Did a year as a full service ER doc, 10 24-hour shifts a month in a little rural emergency room. Then 10 years of full service primary practice, family practice in Mount Vernon, Washington. If here is Seattle and here is Vancouver, BC, I-5 connects them. Mount Vernon's about halfway along. Delivered 500 babies, admitted all my own patients. I was always a member of the executive committee at our 40-doctor multi-specialty group, the whole big thing. And then in 1999, when I was 40, my mother and grandmother had died. And I was a family doc, and one of the thresholds for burnout for family docs is about 10 years in. And the reason is, at a higher percentage than specialists, family docs like novelty. So when we say, that was great, I've never seen anything like that before, we're excited about that. Whereas if I'm a specialist, it would scare the daylights out of me, because what I'm trying to do is to be a master of my little center of the universe. Well, about 10 years in, about 30,000 patient visits in, is when you start to not see that so much. So my mother was gone, my grandmother was gone. I wasn't getting the novelty out of my practice. And what happened to me was I hit a brick wall. Over the course of about 3 weeks in my practice, it felt like somebody was putting me in what they call in the UFC a rear naked choke, which is when they jump on your back, put their elbow around your neck, and choke you out until you tap out. Unfortunately, as a doctor, you don't get to tap out. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if you knew you were being choked out and you could tap and they'd quit, right?
Yeah.
So I went on a sabbatical. I took 30 days off, shaved my head, did a bunch of yoga, came back and prayed that it was gone, but it came back right away. So I actually walked into the CEO's office and signed my resignation and walked away from my medical career, which I don't recommend as a transition strategy because it just burns too many bridges.
Yeah.
I put money on the table as a walk-in clinic doc for a while. I got certified as an executive coach. So I'm an International Coach Federation certified executive coach. I've been coaching doctors and entrepreneurs for about 20 years now. And in 2010, my marriage went away. I got burnt to the ground for the second time. And I decided to launch a little website to see if I could build a coaching business to pull my shoelaces back together again. And I started a company called thehappymd.com. And accumulated a coaching practice, coaching burnout doctors. And I like to write. So when I saw patterns in my clients and what was burning them out and getting them better, I wrote blog posts. That turned into a book. Dr. Dan's got the book, I believe.
Yes.
And then during the time, the book's called Stop Physician Burnout, What to Do When Working Harder Isn't Working. And then at the time, this was 2012, 2014, 2016, what was happening was organizations were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and employing more and more and more doctors. And the organizations that are your employers don't necessarily know about the care and feeding of a healthy physician because burnout rates are at 50% and all that kind of stuff. So they started to ask me, hey, can you come and train our people how to prevent burnout? And so at this point in time, I've trained 40,000 doctors for 175 organizations on 4 continents.
Awesome.
On how to recognize and prevent burnout. And then COVID came along and took away all of our lovely live training social events. I saw your pictures of people live. You were with live people in the intro videos, right?
Yeah.
And now here we are, right?
I really struggled. It was Dr. Dan, Drew, and Jess who produced this, and a few other people really pushed for getting onto social media last year and connecting with people in this manner. It's had pros and cons. You got to get used to looking into this dark circle when we connect with people, as opposed to meeting everyone and feeding the energy, especially when you're dealing with residents. Most of our external outreaches are towards doctors in training with medical, family medicine residency programs, as well as internal medicine.
Right on. So
I have a question for you. Was your grandmother, was she born in the United States?
Yes.
And so was it your great grandparents were the ones who migrated over, and where'd they come from?
Actually, it's more generations back because my grandmother was one of the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution. So she's like six generations in this country.
Wow.
But her father had been a primary care doctor back in the Depression, and she would tell stories about, people who couldn't pay, tie a chicken to the doorknob, that kind of stuff. And so when I decided that I wanted to be a doctor, there was only one image I had in my mind of what a doctor was. And my doctor growing up was a guy named Dr. Schmidt. And Dr. Schmidt had his surgery in the main floor of a building, of a house downtown. I think he might have even lived upstairs. I don't remember, but you know, the Norman Rockwell picture where the kid's going to get a shot in the butt and he's looking at the doctor's credentials. It was just like that. Dr. Schmidt had a compounding pharmacy down the street, and he had a thing that he'd give you in a little jar that he called Dr. Schmidt's Magic Salve. And it used to cure almost anything you put it on. It would take ugly rashes and cuts and stuff, and just almost overnight, it would put them right. And just to describe, I didn't know what it was at the time because sushi wasn't popular in America. It looks just like the bright green wasabi. And it was the same texture and everything. I wish I had the recipe. It probably would be a really important product, or it had arsenic in it or something.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your path. Sadly, I mean, it sounds so familiar. It sounds so familiar. I myself, I can sympathize with you with the personal life. And I just turned 42 myself, you know, just at that time of life. And I can, what you're saying resonates with me as well as I'm sure with many doctors out there. Especially for residents. You know, this generation of residents, I mean, burnout is very real, but there's a difference with burnout, you know, for residents as opposed to doctors who are practicing.
Well, and I would say too that one of the big differences, and most people don't talk about this, but one of the big differences is back in the day, you could be an expert, and you could be an expert with what was between your ears and in the great big pockets of your white coat. You could master your specialty. And it was several years ago that the exponential growth of information in any specialty escaped the human scale. There's a great book, and for anybody who's listening, if you haven't read this book, you've got to read the book because it talks about the inflection point. And it's called Thank You for Being Late. It's an interesting book. Thank You for Being Late. And it talks about how all of the sciences, all of the technology has assumed an exponential growth curve when it comes to the expansion of the knowledge base. And so now all of us are reduced to using search engines to curate queries into a database that no human could ever master. So the whole thing about patients coming and having Google references, well, that's what we're reduced to at this point. And that is a fundamental shift in the experience of being a physician. What is this? I don't know. Let's look it up together. What? Why am I paying you? That kind of stuff. Now, we're going to feel it acutely because we were there during the transition. But yeah, what I found is that I do a lot of work where I'm in front of a room full of practicing physicians. I try, prior to COVID, I try to make sure it's a social event. So I try to make sure there's food and we're breaking bread, and there's drinks for those who imbibe, if not, have a Perrier, and that significant others and partners and spouses are invited because they're your early warning system. And when I'm talking to doctors out in practice, we're talking about how to wrap a life of purpose around your choice to become a physician and to practice medicine. I talk about it being, and if you're a resident, you're very close to this decision point. All of us as light workers have a point of reference where we all stood at the same fork in the road. That was when you were faced with a choice to either go to medical school, if I'm talking to doctors, go to healthcare if I'm not talking to a doctor, or do anything else. And this is when a whole bunch of your friends peeled off here and said, have fun in medical school. I'm not doing that. That's crazy, right? And maybe they knew better than we did at the time. But what I think happened is, at that point when you chose to go to medical school, you realized you were making an extraordinary decision, and you hoped that it would enable an extraordinary life. And the challenge is, you didn't know what you were doing was putting yourself out there as a light worker. You're going to ally your entire professional career with the forces of light in the universe as they battle very specific forces of darkness: illness, suffering, death, dying, and family members' crazed attempts to deal with these things. just like you see now in the COVID wards, right?
Yes.
You chose that way back here. The challenge is you're going to go through a gauntlet run that lasts 7 years minimum to get to the point where you could even join the battle. And then nobody's going to give you a break. And so adapting a practice of medicine to a larger life as we do out in practice is very different than surviving the training process to get you there.
Yes.
And so when I would share with residents and medical students what I was learning and teaching the doctors out in practice, they would do this and cock their head like a dog that doesn't know what it's looking at, because what I was saying didn't make any sense. Because the task in training is a bounded task. You're in a box traversing from start to finish. There's only one goal: cross the finish line. It doesn't matter if you're missing a leg and one eye. As long as you can drag yourself across the finish line, you have completed the task of medical education. Because after all, what do they call the person who graduates last in their medical school class? Doctor.
Doctor. Yeah.
Right. And so one of the things that is probably true about the Lightworkers Fork in the Road is you made the choice to do something extraordinary. Your friends may have known better than you just exactly what you were going to go through to get to the far side of education. And what it produces, in my experience, is it sets the conditions for burnout. So for instance, medical school and residency are so intense that you typically end up focusing almost all of your life force on your studies. Compared to what you were as an undergraduate, you have less friends. You have less hobbies. You may have evidence of having had hobbies and friends in the back corners of your closet, but you have no time for them now. So that when you graduate out and it's time to build a life around this practice you're now qualified to do, you're all in. Your practice becomes the alpha, the omega, the focus of all your income, all your time, all your thinking, all your worry. And that single-minded focus on just the practice of medicine, as I can attest, and Dr. Dan can attest, and I don't know, Faisel, did you graduate from a non-work hour restricted residency program?
We had work hour restrictions. That was the one thing I got in trouble for repeatedly with my program director.
Violating them?
There was an interesting case. You want to follow it. You want to see it through. And
Right.
I trained at an unopposed family medicine residency program. So it was a wonderful experience, delivering the babies, the trauma, ICU, the medical ward, admitting. I mean, the whole experience was the best time of my life. Honestly, it was crazy, but it was the best time of my life. And, but yeah, I used to get into trouble for violating my work hour restrictions.
Well, and what ended up happening in 2003, 2004, when work hour restrictions came in, it made a break point in the experience of going through the medical education process. It didn't change its fundamental nature. It just removed some of the pressure.
Yes.
Because one of the things that happens in residency and medical school is it is the energetic equivalent of waterboarding. So what's going to happen is you're going to be asked to show up and continue to function as best you can when you're way underwater, right? Your energy's below zero. All of your friends who said, go to medical school, I'm not going there, would have called in sick. Sorry, I'm not feeling it today, right? Which ain't going to work if you're a doctor.
No.
Because if you ever stop, you're out.
That's it.
There's no forgiveness. So that becomes our never show weakness programming. The patient comes first by itself is bad enough if you don't have an off switch on it when you're away from the patient. And then never show weakness is the second of the prime directives. And it gets set up in residency.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I mean, even when we talk about half of American doctors being burnt out, I just wonder how many more truly are, but they just will not admit it.
Well, we actually do have a data point. If I can get all geeky about research,
Please.
I don't do this very much, but this is the one study that I thought was actually kind of interesting. Otherwise, it's quite monotonous. You know, it's like, okay, so the big three Mayo studies, 2011, 14, and 17 that were done on burnout, they sent out like, 120,000 surveys and only 7,000 or 8,000 came back. What about the rest of them? Well, there was a study that they did later, and what they did was they took the people who didn't respond, because it was an online survey, and they sent 400 of them letters that said, if you fill out this survey, we'll give you, and I won't reveal the size of the gift certificate yet. You'll figure out what a survey is worth, though, in just a second. They got half of these people to respond to the survey the second time around for a little bit of an enticement. And it turns out they were identical to the folks that responded in the first round. So I think that question has actually been put to bed, that it actually is a reasonable sample. By the way, the dollar amount to get them to respond in round 2 was, what do you think?
I have no idea. I mean, for a doctor to respond, take their time to respond.
It's way less than you think.
I'm going to go with $5.
25.
$25. Okay.
$25 Amazon gift certificate. Yep.
So Dike, we have a question from Roberta, who says, what part does the reduced interest in becoming a doctor, along with the growing acuity and age of patients, play in MD burnout? And what does the pressure to produce revenue play? Dealing with residents and students, I don't know that there's decreased interest in people becoming doctors. Seems like all of the slots are getting filled, but so I might take exception to that part of the question. But I think the rest of the question brings up some interesting points.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the American population, it's just going to continue to age, and with age comes age and obesity becomes more and more conditions that you have to deal with. And what's interesting too is that this is one of the key teaching points about burnout is a lot of times in the English language, we use the word problem to describe anything that obstructs us from reaching our goals. But the word problem is 95% of the time inaccurate. It's wrong. And let me just give you just a couple of examples. So for instance, the word problem comes from mathematics, and it's actually quite precise. By definition, a problem has a solution. And if I apply a solution to a problem, help me out here, what happens to the problem? It
goes away.
Goes away. No problem, right? So mathematical example, 2 + 2 is what?
4.
4. Now I've solved this problem, so I can imagine that it's a sack of sand that I'm going to throw it onto the solved problem pile behind me, and I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? 4 + 4 is what?
8.
Awesome. I solved another problem. The solution to burnout is what? And it's like, there goes your head again.
That's what you're here to tell us.
Right. Well, do you think, let's just be really clear, if burnout was a problem, then somewhere there would be one thing you only have to do one time and you never have to worry about it again. Do you think that exists somewhere and we just haven't discovered it yet? And it's not cocaine, okay? Because even that comes to an end, right? So the answer is no. And the key is, like so much of the challenges we face in life, burnout's not a problem, it's a dilemma. It's a never-ending balancing act. On one side is the energy that you burn. On the other side is your ability to recharge, which you were never taught in medical school. And the way you maintain the balance you seek in a dilemma is with a different S word, not a solution. It's a strategy. The only difference between solution and strategy is the number of steps. But here's the interesting thing, and this is going to be fun talking in front of a group of residents. Guess what? Guess what the first page of a patient chart is called? It's a list. What's the name of the list? It's the patient's
problem list.
Problem list. Okay, great. Show me a problem on a patient's problem list. Show me anything on a patient's problem list that there is a one-step solution for. So for instance, if Mavis came in last week and I lanced a boil on her butt and I fixed it, it was a problem. I fixed it in a single visit. Would I put it on her problem list? The answer is no. What's on there? Type 2 diabetes, morbid obesity, coronary artery disease, degenerative hip disease. I mean, it just goes on and on. Dilemma, 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 dilemma. So we just use this word problem in a way that makes you feel bad if you don't have the solution, when it's not a problem in the first place and there is no solution. You have to actually give up trying to solve it. Just looping back, right? I talked about residency and medical school driving a focus on your career that's unhealthy. A tip: go into your closet. If you're a resident right now, go into your closet and find the old 35 millimeter camera you used to use as an undergrad, or whatever hobby you've abandoned, and pick it up and play with it a little bit. Spend a half an hour on Sunday planning your week ahead to carve out an hour here and an hour there to do some things that give you some juice, that don't have anything to do with your career. Work a strategy of little steps to build some space and some breathing room for yourself so you can put your shoulders back and enjoy some of the things you used to do before you decided to become a doctor, and see if you can't maintain something like that.
It's interesting when you said about doctors forgetting what they used to, what they used to enjoy in life. I remember with my oldest son, he's turning 14 this month, and after we started having conversations, he said, "Well, Dad, did you ever used to like to play sports?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, a long time ago." It's like the things that we enjoy doing so much in the pursuit of becoming a physician, we let it go. And it's no wonder when we get out of our residency training, we are trained to think in algorithms and to try to problem solve, solution solve. And we lost the relationship. We lost what it was to build and maintain healthy relationships along the way.
Yep. And what ends up happening is a standard career path would have you go through the residency and medical school experience, which, by the way, there's no wiggle room there. You have a set of classes, like a set of tracks, and you're a little train. Again, you're just trying to get to the finish line. And what happens is after 4 years of med school, 3 years of residency, maybe a fellowship or two, I'm a family doc, so it was just 7 years for me. You've absolutely forgotten you have free will. And you take a job that you played no role in designing, right? Especially if you become an employee. You're trying to fulfill someone else's job description, just like you tried to do everything they asked you to do in your residency and medical school. And what ends up happening is burnout is inevitable, because what are the odds that this job description, which is a pretty standard, box, what are the chances that this job description happens to, by random chance, be aimed right at your ideal job description? Right at what's perfect for you and your family? What are the odds? The answer is 0. So what happens is you're going to be a good soldier for as long as you can tolerate it. You're going to work real hard, color inside the lines, do whatever it takes, be a team player. And it's going to hurt unless you take a role in designing what it is that you do by creating an ideal job description and working in that direction to carve out, again, some space for what you enjoy about your career and your practice. And that's where time constraints come in, right? The difference between a DPC practice and an industrial employee practice, a lot of the time, a lot of the basic fundamental differences is to remove the time pressure from the patient encounter.
From that comment earlier, the stress of having to generate revenue is such a real, it's a real issue. I remember when I started, I joined an FQHC out of residency, and my orientation was the morning of. It was a half a day of logins and signing papers and all, and
luxury.
Yeah, and I was told, oh, you got patients scheduled that afternoon, so I went to the clinic to go see patients. And when I got there, the the center manager said, "Oh, you're the new guy, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready to change the world." She's like, "Well, you're late. The patients are waiting for you."
Right. Your rooms are full and you're late.
And I said,
Absolutely.
"I don't know how to bill." I remember saying, "I didn't know how to bill," and she said, "Oh, just put 99213 for everything." Sure enough, a couple months later, I had like 400 charts that were wellness visits that shouldn't have had the 99213. But the time that's spent just documenting for revenue is in itself something that none of us were prepared for when we started.
And if you practice industrial medicine as an employee, if you can get these numbers, because sometimes they aren't quite as forthcoming and transparent as you would like them to be.
Yeah.
What is your gross collections? And what's the total value of your take-home pay and your retirement and benefit package? What is the percentage that you're taking home of the money that comes into the institution as a result of your efforts? And what you'll find is that a classic overhead number for a big industrial medicine facility with the big buildings and all that kind of stuff, and the business office that has as many people in it as they have doctors seeing patients.
Yeah.
That's going to be up around 65, 70, and sometimes even more percent. Their overhead's going to be that high.
The time just flew by. I wanted to have Dr. Drummond talk about the advantages of physician wellness.
Okay.
What we could do is if we could take a quick 20-second commercial break from ChenMed, and then we can come back because the time literally just flew by. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the advantages of physician wellness. And Dr. Dan, you were about to say something. I'm sorry.
No, I have one question for him too when we come back as well. So go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Let's take a quick
ChenMed honors seniors with affordable, top-of-the-line care, and we're expanding. We're opening 25 new centers this year, including centers in 2 new cities, Houston and Detroit. Join us as we bring better healthcare to more seniors. Head to chenmed.com/physicians for more information.
And we're back. See, I promise it was just 20 seconds. So, Dr. Dan, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just reviewing. When we do workshops, we always like to use Don Berwick's question about Tuesday morning. So, what would you give our listeners or the residents if they were going to do something by next Tuesday morning to either learn something new or do something differently? What would your suggestion be? And the good thing is it's Tuesday evening, so they've got a whole week to get it accomplished.
Yeah, the challenge with being a resident is that it's hard to do some of the things that'll make the biggest difference in your day. But what I would say is think about how you can fit a team huddle into your day. And especially now that everybody's under stress, everybody's like ships passing in the night, busy, overloaded, overwhelmed. And everybody's got a life outside of our careers that is equally busy, overworked, and overwhelmed. And most, just so you know, everywhere nationwide, everybody is short-staffed. Even more so at the support staff level, medical assistants and receptionists and everybody else that fleshes out the institution. Anytime you walk in and you're going to be seeing patients for even a half day, you hopefully have a little team. You and the person who's rooming your patients and maybe somebody in the front who is your receptionist. Hug them, hold them, get them in a circle your wagons, ask them how they're doing. Just take 5 minutes to run your schedule. And what will happen is you will enjoy your work and seeing patients better. You'll be calmer and more centered. They will too, because you took an interest in them, and you'll be able to put out some of the fires ahead of you if you review the schedule with him before you start seeing patients. I know for a fact that every minute that you devote to a quick huddle, hey, everybody, gather around, right? Every minute you put into that is going to save you 5, 10, maybe even 15 over the course of however many hours you're going to be seeing patients. And it makes such a huge difference. Everybody knows they're supposed to be doing it. But when I ask big audiences, it's only about 2 or 3% of people who huddle up regularly. The second thing I would say is this weekend, go buy a paper calendar. the ones that have, pictures of roses or your favorite sports team or whatever, and about 3 colored pens. Okay. And what I want you to do is on Sunday, I want you to sit at the kitchen table, pull that calendar down and drop it in the middle of the kitchen table and gather around everybody who lives in your crazy menagerie of a household. I don't know who it is, but everybody's got a pretty crazy group, right?
Yes.
And what I'd love you to do is just organize them around some muffins, right? And the week ahead, just 1 week, no more than 1 week. And this is what you're going to do is use your colored pens to create a life calendar. And it's not about work, because you already have your work calendar in your cell phone, right? So what you're going to do is, using these colored pens, write down everything you want in your life this week. So there's book club that I've missed 6 weeks in a row. Let me carve that out. And then there's little Johnny's baseball practice, and, maybe a date night, heaven forbid, or, write down the things that you want, then take a picture of that with your cell phone. So you always have your life calendar in your cell phone next to your work calendar. And then when somebody says, hey, Dike, can you take a couple extra hours for me on Thursday? I'm going to say, hang on a second, John, let me check. Oh man, date night, not going to be able to help. I've got something better to do. Because if you don't have a life calendar, the only thing that's going to get done is what is in your calendar, and that's work. Now, maybe it's just a half hour a week that you carve out, but it's a half hour a week, right? Go find that camera in the back of your closet, right? Go pull out your journal where you used to write really crazy poetry, whatever, right? Put your hair up in a man bun. What do I know, right? Do some of that too, just to maintain your bandwidth. Does that make sense? So there's 2.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And I just appreciate you coming out and giving us such an entertaining and thoughtful conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely going to have you come back again.
Of
Sometime in the
course.
future. We'll have you come back again. And I'd love to have you also come on one of our, for ChenMed with our doctors too. I'd love to have you come on and do like one of our lunches. That'd be wonderful.
Right on.
To our audience, thank you for joining us. For more information about tonight's topic and to explore career opportunities with ChenMed, remember, we are on track to opening another 400-500 centers all across the country. We're already in 12 states. We're opening in at least 2 or 3 more next year. Please visit chenmed.com. We believe access to primary care is a right, not a privilege.